One step. Just one.
Not every cost is counted in money.
Welcome back to the deep dive. If you've ever felt stuck, like really stuck in a financial rut, maybe thinking that wealth is just for the lucky ones, people who inherited money or just stumbled into some massive break, well, this deep dive is definitely for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because today, we're not really talking about the usual stuff, stocks, bonds, budgeting hacks. That's not the focus.
Right.
We received this fantastic stack of research from a listener, and it shifts the whole conversation. It moves away from external things like market forces and looks inward. It's all about the sort of psychological setup for wealth.
Okay.
The main idea running through all this material, it's pretty radical, but also simple. You have to fundamentally change how you think before you can actually change what you earn, or maybe more importantly, what you keep.
Okay, right. So let's unpack that. Our mission today, it's very specific. We're boiling it down to the 5 most critical mindset shifts. And these can be tough, but they're the ones needed to move from just, surviving, where money feels like this constant weight.
That constant drain.
Exactly. To genuinely thriving, we're pulling out actionable psychological insights here, not just, quick financial tips.
And the core premise, the thing we're really hammering home today, is that building wealth, it's actually less about luck or how much you earn right now, or even how smart you are in terms of formal education. It's far more about this internal transformation. It's about discipline and, honestly, just the courage to adopt completely new ways of thinking. If you get that internal programming right,
then the rest follow.
The external results, the money stuff, it almost becomes this inevitable side effect.
Yeah, I like that framing. It treats money almost like a mirror, right? Reflecting our deepest beliefs about ourselves, our potential. Okay, so where do we start? What's the biggest anchor the sources say holds people back?
It starts with the biggest one, really, the scarcity mindset. We have to stop that first.
Okay, scarcity mindset. Let's dig in.
So the sources make this really compelling point, maybe a bit sobering too. They argue that financial poverty, a lot of the time, it's actually a cognitive thing. It plants itself in your mind way before it shows up as an empty bank account.
Wow. So it's a thought pattern first.
The deeply ingrained pattern of thought, yeah. And that pattern dictates your behavior, your choices.
And what's really striking in the material is how often this is inherited. Like, it's the background noise you grew up with.
Oh, absolutely. Hearing "we can't afford it" over and over, or the one that's maybe even more damaging psychologically.
Which one's that?
That's not for people like us.
Oof. Yeah, that one cuts deep.
It's devastating, right? Because it stops being about just like a temporary money issue. It becomes part of your identity, how you see yourself in relation to wealth. When you hear "that's not for people like us," you internalized financial limits as this permanent, fixed thing about you, about your life.
Not just a challenge to overcome, but like a fundamental truth about who you are.
Exactly. It becomes a truth, not just a condition you're currently in.
Okay, so if you accept that limit as this permanent truth, what happens inside your head when you face, say, a new opportunity? Or maybe something comes up that needs money. How does that scarcity thinking actively block creative problem solving?
Well, it basically acts like this massive psychological shutdown switch. If your fundamental belief, your operating system, says resources are permanently scarce for you and that you are somehow unworthy or incapable of getting those resources.
Your brain just stops looking for solutions.
Pretty much, yeah. Because your brain loves efficiency, right?
Yeah.
If it thinks the answer is already no, why waste precious energy trying to figure out a yes? It's evolutionarily inefficient.
So the scarcity mindset is actually limiting your own brain power. Like, it's hamstringing the part of your brain that does the planning, the innovating, the complex thing.
The prefrontal cortex, yeah.
Because the emotional reactive part, the amygdala, has already filed it under nope, can't be done, fixed situation.
Spot on. You just stop looking for ways to earn more or save differently or maybe combine resources in a creative way. Why? Because you've already decided, subconsciously usually, that you're structurally blocked from that goal.
Okay.
And this leads directly to this really crucial insight from the sources. It's about a pivotal shift in language. Just changing how you talk about it separates, poor thinking from wealthy thinking.
And the power of this is that it boils down to changing just one core thing. Turning a statement that shuts things down into a question that opens things up.
Exactly. The limiting phrase, the one that's like a full stop, ends the conversation, is saying, I can't afford it.
Right. It's final, done deal, no discussion needed.
It's an absolute declaration. It slams the door on any kind of inquiry or problem solving.
But the mindset that actually leads to growth, it flips that around. It turns it into a question, how can I afford it? It seems so simple, just changing a statement to a question, but the mental difference is huge.
Oh, it's night and day. It's the difference between, learned helplessness and actually having agency. That question, how can I afford it? It immediately bypasses that emotional shutdown we talked about.
Okay.
It redirects your brain power away from feeling inadequate and channels it straight into generating creative solutions. It doesn't mean you have to buy the thing right now.
Right. It's not about instant gratification.
No, it commits you to finding a pathway. Even if that path takes, 5 years or involves multiple steps, it opens the search.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second here, because this is where I think some people might get tripped up. Isn't there a risk? If you're constantly asking, how can I afford it? Couldn't that lead to being reckless, like financing something you really shouldn't, or taking on high interest debt just because you want something?
That's a really important point and a valid concern. The sources definitely address this. They emphasize that it's about disciplined creativity.
Disciplined creativity. Okay.
Yeah. The question isn't a license to just go borrow wildly. It's a commitment to finding a sustainable, high-leverage solution. It forces you to think bigger.
How so?
Well, it pushes you to consider alternatives like, okay, maybe I need to generate a whole new income stream. Or maybe I need to seriously optimize my budget in a way I haven't before. Or maybe I need to learn a specific high-value skill that justifies a much higher salary. Or maybe I need to restructure the assets I already have in a smarter way.
That makes a lot more sense. So it's not, how can I get this now? It's, what puzzle do I need to solve to make this possible sustainably? It forces planning, not just reacting.
Precisely. It shifts the task from, I'm restricted, to, I have a complex challenge here that requires leverage and strategy. It demands action planning, not passive resignation.
Got it. And, the historical context here is interesting, too. The sources link this back to Aristotle, actually. His observation that our early conditioning really shapes our lifelong patterns. We're creatures of habit, deeply conditioned.
So if you grew up where scarcity was just the constant background music, that becomes your subconscious default setting, your brain's operating system.
Which means this isn't just about changing a phrase you say out loud. This is hard work. You're actively trying to rewire neurological pathways that might have been running since childhood.
Absolutely. It takes real vigilance. But the good news, the really encouraging part, is that these deep patterns, they aren't fixed laws you can't change. They're habits of thought.
And habits can be changed.
They can. Reprogramming starts with deliberate interruption. Every single time that old negative final thought pops up, I can't afford it, you have to consciously, catch it and immediately replace it with the challenging, open-ended question, okay, wait, how can I afford it?
That discipline forces you to operate from a place of possibility, always, even if the answer isn't obvious or easy right away. That shift from fixed mindset to growth mindset, just through language, that's step one.
Right. And this internal shift, it naturally leads us into the second big transformation we need to talk about, because once you commit to growth, you often find that your current environment, well, it might not support that growth anymore.
Okay, so the environment. The sources use this great metaphor here, really relatable, the plant in a pot. A plant is designed to grow, right? But if its roots hit the hard edges of a pot that's too small,
growth stops instantly. It gets pot-bound.
Yeah. And human potential, the sources argue, works exactly the same way. We limit ourselves professionally, socially, mentally, when we refuse to push beyond our existing comfortable boundaries. We might have adopted that how can I mindset internally.
But if you stay in the same psychological pod, those new roots have nowhere to spread. The growth gets stunted anyway.
And we all kind of know what being pot-bound feels like, don't we? It's that feeling of comfortable stagnation. Maybe it's the job that's easy but boring, or the social circle that just reinforces your current limits, or just the same old routines that don't ask anything new of you.
It feels safe. That's the key. But it's fundamentally capping your potential for expansion.
The tricky part, though, is that our brains like that safety. The sources really hammer this point.
Right.
True progress requires discomfort. And that's the core battle, isn't it? Your survival instinct, your lizard brain.
Yeah, the old part of the brain.
It equates risk, change, the unknown with danger. It's basically hardwired to keep you snug in that comfortable, familiar, maybe too small pot, even if you're kind of miserable there.
That's a hugely powerful internal force working against you. The brain is saying, hey, familiar territory here. Stay put. Okay, maybe it's restrictive, but at least we know what to expect. It's predictable.
Exactly. So to achieve real growth, real wealth, you have to consciously override that comfort-seeking instinct. The difference between just surviving, accepting the pot's limits, and deliberately thriving, which means breaking the pot. It's that conscious choice to step into unfamiliar territory, unfamiliar experiences.
And often, this choice involves situations that feel pretty high stakes, things we instinctively shy away from, like actually networking with people who seem way more successful than you, or negotiating for a significantly bigger salary than you think you deserve, or taking on a big project where, frankly, you don't have all the answers yet. That uncertainty feels dangerous.
Right.
The author gives this really relatable example from his own life that illustrates this perfectly. He talks about being naturally very shy, like intensely introverted. The mere thought of public speaking gave him paralyzing anxiety.
So his small pot was silence, staying invisible.
Totally. Silence and anonymity. That was his comfort zone.
Okay, so how did he break out of that? Did he just wait until he magically felt less anxious?
Absolutely not. And that's the key insight. He understood that waiting to feel ready is often just procrastination in disguise.
Yeah.
Readiness is a myth.
So he acted first.
He forced himself. He joined Toastmasters. The action came before the confidence. He deliberately engaged in public speaking because it terrified him. And by doing that consistently, he didn't just get better at speaking, he expanded his whole capacity, his pod, for managing stressful situations, which, let's face it, is absolutely crucial for building any kind of significant wealth or success.
That really highlights a critical dynamic, doesn't it? Most people kind of operate backwards. They assume confidence has to come before the action. They think, oh, I'll wait until I feel confident enough to ask for that raise, or I'll launch my business idea when I feel really ready.
But the reality, and the sources are super clear on this, is that competence and the confidence that comes with it, they are the result of taking consistent, often uncomfortable action. They're not the prerequisites.
You have to commit to breaking the pot first, then the expansion happens.
Exactly. You grow into the bigger space you create by acting.
And this idea of outgrowing old environments, it sounds like it's not just about changing your job or moving cities, right? It's psychological, too.
Oh, definitely. It's multi-layered. It means leaving behind old ways of thinking that kept you small.
Yeah.
And sometimes, maybe even distancing yourself from certain relationships that actively, maybe unintentionally, reinforce the old you, the status quo.
That sounds like it could create friction.
It absolutely does. It's almost inevitable. When you start growing fast, the people, the systems, the routines that were comfortable with the old, smaller version of you, they might get uncomfortable, maybe even resistant or hostile.
So you have to be prepared for that pushback.
You have to accept that your ambition, your growth, might create some social awkwardness, some dissonance. But you need to reframe that pain, that discomfort of moving beyond the status quo. That's actually evidence that you're growing. It's a sign you're breaking the pot.
So the takeaway here is if you feel stuck, persistently stagnant, take a hard look at your environment. Is it too small for the growth you want? And maybe ask yourself, has the pain of staying stuck become greater than the fear of the discomfort needed to expand?
That's the calculation. We have to constantly seek out environments, challenges, and even people that demand more from us than we think we currently possess. If your roots aren't constantly pushing against some kind of boundary,
You're not tapping into your full potential.
right, you're not accessing the depth of resources needed for that bigger growth, especially financially. We need to consciously choose activities. Maybe it's high-stakes networking for you, or cold calling if you're in sales, or learning a really difficult, high-value technical skill things that actively yank us out of those comfortable limits we set for ourselves years ago.
That willingness to embrace discomfort. Okay, that sets us up perfectly for the third shift, doesn't it? Because now we move from the internal struggle with comfort zones to how we actually act in the external world with our resources. It's about choosing controllable growth versus just chasing luck.
Exactly. This third segment really takes aim at one of the most pervasive and frankly damaging cultural myths around wealth building, the shortcut trap.
Ah, yes, the allure of getting rich quick.
Our society seems almost addicted to it, doesn't it? The narrative of the overnight success, the huge lottery win, that one speculative bet that just magically bypasses years and years of, well, boring financial discipline.
It's this fantasy, right? That you can solve a problem that requires discipline with just a single stroke of external luck. And people cling to it, even though the odds for things like lotteries or, high-risk speculative trading without real knowledge, the odds are just terrible.
Mathematically dismal, yeah. But the lure is incredibly strong, and it's a massive psychological drain.
How so?
Well, when you focus your energy, your hopes, on luck, you are fundamentally giving away your own power, your own agency. You're literally betting against math.
Yeah.
But more importantly, psychologically, you're choosing intermittent reinforcement.
Okay, what's that?
It's that addictive quality of gambling. You get a small random reward occasionally, which encourages you to keep playing despite overall losses. We're
Wow.
choosing that over delayed gratification.
And delayed gratification is?
It's the bedrock, the foundational tool of all real sustainable wealth building. It's choosing the long-term gain over the immediate, unlikely hit.
Got it. The source material gives this brilliant, really simple comparison that makes this crystal clear. It contrasts two people, John and David, same money, totally different mindsets and outcomes.
Yes, let's break down the numbers and the thinking behind them because it's undeniable. We start with David. David is our gambler.
Okay.
David decides he's going to spend $100 every single month on lottery tickets. Feels like a small amount, maybe just harmless entertainment.
Right, $100 a month. Over a year, that's $1,200. So after, say, 10 years, David has spent $12,000. What does he realistically have to show for that consistent investment in chance?
Okay, quick correction on my previous math recall.
Yeah.
The source says $7,200 spent over 6 years. Let's stick with the 10-year example for clarity. So $100 a month for 10 years is $12,000 spent. And statistically, he almost certainly has a pile of worthless paper tickets.
And a guaranteed long-term loss.
Guaranteed. The very structure of any lottery is designed mathematically to pay out significantly less than it takes in. The odds are stacked against the player by design. David's $12,000 over 10 years. It's essentially a sunk cost. It's gone, with a near-zero expected financial return. The gambling mindset treats money as a consumable ticket you buy for a fantasy. It guarantees loss over time.
Okay, so that's David. Now let's contrast him with John. John is our investor.
Right. John takes the exact same $100 a month, identical amount, identical frequency, but instead of buying lottery tickets, he puts it into a low-cost diversified index fund, something simple like an S&P 500 tracker fund. And let's assume, conservatively, based on historical averages over long periods, a 10% average annual return.
Okay, same $100 a month, 10 years, but invested consistently. What's the result for John?
This is where the power of discipline and compounding just blows the gambling approach away. After those same 10 years, through consistent calculated growth, John ends up with over $20,000.
Wow, okay, wait. Same $12,000 put in, 100 about 12 months by 10 years, but John ends up with over $20,000, while David has essentially nothing.
Exactly. John's net wealth from that same disciplined $100 a month is vastly greater, almost double his contributions, and infinitely better than David's outcome.
That difference is just staggering. And it wasn't achieved because John earned more or was some kind of genius stock picker. It was just consistency.
Yeah.
Choosing investment over speculation. We should probably touch on why that difference is so massive.
It's compounding, right?
It's all about compounding growth. Einstein supposedly called it the eighth wonder of the world, and for good reason. In John's case, that 10% return isn't just on the new $100 he puts in each month. It's also earned on the returns, the interest or growth he got in all the previous months and years.
So his money starts making money for him.
Precisely. It's exponential growth. It starts slow, sure. It might not look impressive in year 1 or 2, but after 10 years, that growth curve really starts to steepen and accelerate. Whereas David's investment is totally linear, or rather negative linear. $100 in, effectively $0 return, maybe less after taxes if you won a tiny prize. Compounding is where the real magic happens for wealth accumulation.
And the sources are absolutely adamant about this. Real wealth is built through investing, not gambling. Investing involves calculating risk, understanding underlying value, relying on economic growth, and proven systems over time. Gambling is basically just consumption fueled by hope.
This feels incredibly relevant right now, especially with, all the hype around certain volatile digital assets or meme stocks. What happens psychologically when people start treating investing like buying a lottery ticket, chasing that 1,000x return overnight?
That's precisely the danger zone. When the narrative shifts from long-term value accumulation, which is what real investing is, towards short-term, high-risk speculation, people start confusing gambling with investing. They're not the same thing at all.
Even if they use the same brokerage app.
Exactly. Real wealth building requires that delayed gratification we talked about. It's the boring, steady discipline of letting capital compound over decades, usually. The lottery, or treating stocks like lottery tickets, appeals to that instant gratification urge, which, as we established earlier, is kind of the essence of staying stuck in that small pot mindset. You want the quick fix, not the long-term growth.
So this shift from gambling to investing, it's crucial because it moves your focus. It takes it away from external luck, which you absolutely cannot control,
Right, totally uncontrollable.
and puts it squarely onto consistent, manageable discipline, which is entirely within your control. You can't control the market's daily swings or the lottery numbers, but you can control that $100 you decide to invest each month and the sensible, diversified system you choose to put it into.
It's the fundamental shift from wishing and hoping to planning and executing, and that commitment to consistent discipline. It links directly to our next big mindset shift, which tackles why so many people spend money trying to look rich instead of actually becoming secure.
Ah, okay. Keeping up with the Joneses, or maybe now it's keeping up with the Instagrammers.
Exactly. This segment dives deep into that devastating psychological trap of needing visible wealth. It's the compulsion to signal success externally, often by sacrificing your actual genuine financial security to do it.
The sources use that great metaphor again. The peacock flaunting its feathers.
Yeah, it's a perfect analogy. It's this big, expensive, attention-grabbing display. It serves a short-term social purpose signaling status, maybe attracting a mate, but it comes at a huge long-term cost in terms of energy and vulnerability. And for humans, financial vulnerability.
And this is just amplified like crazy today with social media, isn't it? There's this immense pressure to curate an image of affluence, of having made it.
Enormous pressure. We seem driven by this deep need for social approval, for perceived status. And we often forget that the audience watching our performance online, most of them have absolutely zero impact on our actual financial well-being or security. We're performing for strangers, often.
So what's the financial consequence of all this signaling? The sources call it something pretty stark.
They label it a financial death spiral, masked as success.
Wow. Death spiral masked as success.
Yeah, because you're actively prioritizing the appearance of wealth over the actual creation of wealth. And what does that invariably involve?
Spending money you don't really have or money that should be saved or invested.
Right. Taking on consumer debt for cars, clothes, vacations you can't afford, liquidating potential savings, accumulating liabilities, things that cost you money over time, that lose value rapidly, instead of assets that grow.
Okay, so to really understand the damage here, the source material points to some pretty solid research, right? Specifically from that classic book, The Millionaire Next Door.
Yes, that research is critical here, because it systematically, over decades, just blew up the common myth of what a millionaire looks like and acts like.
And what did that research actually find? It was kind of counterintuitive, wasn't it?
It showed this vast, almost comical gap between how most people imagine wealthy people live and how people who have actually accumulated significant net worth, real assets minus liabilities, how they typically live.
They're not usually the ones with the super flashy lifestyles.
Not at all, usually the opposite.
Yeah.
The research found that the vast majority of genuine millionaires, especially first-generation millionaires, live surprisingly modest lives. They're often self-employed, maybe small business owners or professionals, in stable but not necessarily glamorous fields. Their lives aren't defined by splashy spending.
Right. The book talks about how they don't usually drive brand new luxury cars.
Often they drive cars that are 3, 5, even 10 years old. Sensible brands. They're not dripping in designer labels. They shop at regular stores, use coupons.
It sounds kind of boring, maybe.
Their whole financial philosophy is centered on rigorously avoiding unnecessary luxury. They're masters of discretionary spending, meaning they choose where their money goes rather than letting desires dictate spending. Their wealth isn't built on consuming stuff. It's built on deliberate, calculated accumulation. And, frankly, being discreet about it. They value financial freedom far more than showing off.
Okay, so this forces us to really redefine wealth, doesn't it? To split spending into two totally different categories driven by different mindsets.
Exactly. The first type is visible consumption. This is spending on status symbols, things intended mainly to impress other people. Think luxury cars, designer clothes, McMansions maybe. These are almost always liabilities.
Things that take money out of your pocket month after month. High insurance, depreciation, maintenance.
Precisely. They drain your resources. The second type, and this is the priority for the genuinely wealthy people studied, is invisible spending, or maybe a better term, invisible allocating.
Okay, what falls into that category?
This is putting resources towards things nobody else necessarily sees, but which build real long-term security and options. Things like boosting your savings rate, consistently investing in diversified assets, maybe paying down debt aggressively, investing in your own skills or education, building up cash reserves. These are assets.
Things that eventually put money into your pocket through growth, dividends, or just providing security and options.
Right. The fundamental difference is the trade-off. Visible consumption trades your future security for trying to get present approval from others, which is, financially speaking, a terrible trade.
Yeah.
Invisible spending or allocating trades maybe some present gratification or flashiness for future freedom and options. The wealthy people in the study understood this instinctively. Live modestly now so you can live freely later. If you try to live like you're super rich now, especially when you're not, you pretty much guarantee financial struggle later.
That shift in priority from appearance to optionality, that's huge. And it must take incredible internal strength to resist that constant social pressure to signal success, especially with advertising and social media constantly screaming that your worth is tied to your latest purchase.
It really does. It requires a strong sense of self-worth that isn't dependent on external validation. But the moment you genuinely stop needing to impress other people financially, you free up not just massive amounts of financial capital that was going towards that signaling.
But mental energy too, right?
Huge amounts of psychological energy. And that energy can then be redirected towards actually building those invisible assets, the investments, the business equity, the cash reserves, the things that truly guarantee your choices and your freedom down the road.
So the core message here, reinforced by that research, is clear. Wealth isn't what you show everyone, it's what you quietly keep and grow in assets and reserves. Real financial freedom comes from accumulating those invisible, durable assets, not from public displays of status fueled by debt.
Nailed it. And mastering this internal discipline, this focus on the invisible over the visible, brings us straight to our final and maybe the most challenging mindset shift of all.
Okay, the final shift. And this one sounds like it tackles something really fundamental.
It does. The shift is possibly the toughest because it demands we confront a harsh reality head-on. The sources insist we have to start by acknowledging the world isn't fair, period.
Right. We can't talk about building wealth without acknowledging that people start from vastly different places.
Exactly. We have to recognize the reality of structural inequalities, systemic biases, massive differences in access to good education, lack of opportunities just based on where you were born or who your parents are.
Yeah.
These barriers are real. They're significant.
And it's so important to start there because when people feel paralyzed or just deeply frustrated, it's often because they are facing real external challenges, uphill battles that maybe others don't have to deal with. Ignoring that just feels invalidating and dismisses the reality.
Completely. Acknowledgement is step one. However, the sources pivot very quickly from just acknowledging the unfairness to focusing on action.
Yeah.
They highlight the danger of surrender.
Me.
Meaning, while the unfairness is absolutely real, choosing to just surrender to that feeling of it's all rigged against me, that feeling of powerlessness, well, that guarantees defeat. It turns what might be a significant but potentially temporary obstacle into a permanent internal reason to stop trying. The goal has to be retaining your sense of agency despite the obstacles.
Okay, so that's the deep question then, isn't it? How do you hold both truths at the same time? How do you fully internalize the reality of external unfairness without letting it just crush your internal motivation? How do you keep psychological momentum when the odds genuinely feel stacked against you?
And the author provides this brilliant, very structured technique to handle exactly that cognitive friction. It's called the two-column exercise. It's a tool designed specifically to help you visually untangle that overwhelming feeling of frustration and, critically, force the transformation of passive worry into focused, measurable action.
I like the sound of that. Practical. Let's walk through exactly how it works because this feels like where the rubber meets the road for a lot of people feeling stuck.
Okay, it starts super simple. Take a piece of paper or open a doc and draw a line right down the middle. 2 columns.
Got it. Left side, right side.
The left column is where you inventory the external obstacles, all the things causing you genuine frustration that feel truly outside of your direct personal control right now.
So this is where you list the unfair stuff.
Yes. Be honest. Put down things like, the cost of living, especially rent, in my city is ridiculously high and eats up all my potential savings. Or, I lack a degree from a fancy university, and that seems to matter in my field. Or maybe there's systemic bias in my industry that clearly favors people with existing connections. Or even, it's incredibly hard to find time and energy to learn a new skill when I'm already working 2 jobs just to survive. These are the real constraints.
This is the list of things you can't just snap your fingers and change immediately.
Exactly. And the common psychological trap, the thing that keeps people stuck.
Is just staring at that left column.
Yeah. Focusing on it, ruminating on it, maybe complaining about it, which only reinforces that feeling of being a victim, of being powerless. It drains your energy.
Okay, so the shift happens with the other column.
Precisely. The magic is in the right column. For every single item you listed on the left, your task is to brainstorm and write down specific, small, entirely actionable steps that you can take. These are your direct countermeasures, your responses to the obstacles, focusing only on what is within your control.
Okay, let's run through some examples. So if the left column says, housing costs are crushing me, no room for savings.
Okay, the right column needs concrete actions you can take, even if they're hard. Things like actively research and seriously explore getting a roommate to cut housing costs by X%, or dedicate 5 hours this week to searching for remote work opportunities that might let me earn a similar income but live somewhere cheaper, or even something smaller. Commit to mastering one specific micro side hustle skill this month via online tutorials, aiming to offset just 10% of my rent initially.
Okay, how about another common one? I don't have the right connections. I lack a powerful professional network. That feels very external.
Right, you can't magically conjure a network. But your right column countermeasure needs to be active and specific. For example, commit to attending one virtual or in-person professional networking event relevant to my desired field every week for the next 3 months, even if it feels incredibly awkward at first. Or identify 5 people on LinkedIn who are doing what I wanted to do, research them, and send each one a personalized, concise message this week asking for a brief 15-minute virtual coffee chat for advice. These are actions. You control whether you do them or not.
Okay, and what about feeling stuck because of education or current job limitations? Left column. My current job offers no growth, feels like a dead end, and I can't afford to just quit and go back to school full time.
A very real constraint for many. The right column needs actionable learning or transition steps. Maybe dedicate 90 minutes every weekday evening before watching TV to working through a specific course on Coursera or edX or a coding boot camp focused on acquiring specific marketable skill. Or research local community colleges, government workforce programs, or nonprofits in my area this weekend to see if they offer low-cost certificates or grants for continuing education in target field.
So the real power of this exercise, it's not about pretending the unfairness doesn't exist or solving huge societal problems overnight. It's about reclaiming your personal agency on a micro level.
That's exactly it. It proves visually, right there on the page, that even when facing immense external challenges and unfairness, you're absolutely not powerless. There are always some actions within your sphere of control.
It's like you're intentionally shifting your brain's focus from the passive feeling of frustration, which is draining, to active momentum, which is energizing, even if the steps are small. A sequence of tasks you can tick off.
Yes, you externalize the enemy, the obstacles in the left column, and then you systematically weaponize your own effort with the countermeasures in the right column. This process fundamentally changes how you perceive the problem. It shifts from being this giant, immovable object of unfairness to being a series of challenges that require sustained, strategic effort on your part.
And focusing on those controllable actions, that seems like the only reliable path out of that psychological quicksand of victimhood.
Yeah.
It completely reframes your personal narrative, doesn't it? From look what's happening to me to look what I'm doing about it.
Absolutely. And this reframing, this taking of action despite adversity, leads to the final, really inspiring point the source material makes on this. Facing down these structural challenges, consciously taking action, even small actions, to overcome them. It doesn't just potentially lead to financial improvement, the very difficulty you overcome.
It becomes part of your strength.
It transforms your struggle into what the author calls an epic story in the making. The adversity you navigate and conquer becomes the solid foundation for your future confidence, your resilience, your authority. You didn't just get lucky. You fought for it.
Wow. That's a really profound way to wrap up that final shift. Okay, so these 5 areas, tackling scarcity, breaking comfort zones, choosing investment over gambling, focusing on invisible assets, and taking action over frustration, they really demonstrate conclusively that wealth isn't just about external strategies. It's fundamentally an integrated discipline of the mind. It's about courage, consistency, and accepting discomfort. #tag conclusion.
So just to recap quickly, we've taken a pretty deep dive today into these 5 foundational mindset shifts that the research suggests are absolutely critical if you want to achieve genuine wealth accumulation and, just as importantly, sustain growth. We went beyond the superficial tips.
Right. First, we tackled shifting from that scarcity mindset, that automatic, I can't afford it, to the possibility mindset, really engaging our brains by asking, okay, how can I afford it?
Exactly. Second, we challenged the small pot mentality. recognizing that comfort is often a trap, and that growth requires embracing discomfort, deliberately and continuously outgrowing our old comfort zones, professionally, socially, mentally.
Third, we made a clear choice to reject the guessing game. We focused instead on the incredible power of compounding and consistent disciplined investment, understanding that real wealth is built through reliable systems over time, not by chasing low-probability lottery wins or speculative gambles. Remember John versus David.
John's steady growth wins every time in the long run. Fourth, we talked about stopping the need to impress others, prioritizing the accumulation of those crucial invisible assets, security, savings, investments over spending on visible, depreciating things just for status. True wealth is what you keep and grow, not what you show off.
And finally, just now, we moved past the feeling of powerlessness. We learned how to convert that external frustration about unfairness into internal, actionable momentum using that practical two-column exercise to reclaim our agency, no matter the circumstances.
Those 5 shifts together form the necessary internal architecture. But the sources are really clear on one final, absolutely crucial external piece that needs to be in place. You need a plan, a clear, preferably written financial plan.
That makes total sense. All the mindset shifts in the world. If you don't have a roadmap, you'll just drift, right?
The new discipline, the shifted language, the rejection of visible spending, it needs direction.
Exactly. A plan provides that structure. It gives you the pathway, the measurable goals, the benchmarks that allow your newfound discipline and mindset to actually translate into tangible results over time.
So wealth really is a journey, defined by these deliberate actions, these internal transformations. It's definitely not an accident.
Not at all. And the most critical step, the first step always, is that internal transformation. The external financial results, they're really just the proof that the internal work, the internal mastery is happening. So, as you, our listener, start thinking about how to integrate these ideas, maybe consider this final thought we want to leave you with. The highest leverage decision you can probably make today isn't about picking the perfect stock or finding one more expense to cut. It's simpler, but maybe harder. It's about choosing which one small internal shift you'll commit to starting today.
Yeah. Will you consciously catch yourself saying, I can't, just once today, and swap it for, okay, how can I? Or maybe you'll take just one overwhelming thing from that mental list of external frustrations and put one single, tiny, actionable countermeasure next to it in your mind, or even on paper using that two-column method.
The change doesn't have to wait for the perfect moment or for permission. The process of growth, of building that epic story, it starts right now with that first small conscious shift.
The power to define your own financial future, despite the challenges, is fundamentally within your control, starting with your mindset. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Welcome to the debate. Today, we're diving into the internal fight for financial freedom, specifically looking at source material that suggests wealth building is fundamentally an internal psychological process. The text really emphasizes that personal discipline and courage are the essential precursors to any external financial result.
Mm-hmm. And that emphasis gives, well, incredibly powerful guidance for personal conduct, doesn't it? For immediate behavior change. It speaks to the locus of control in a way that's, very compelling.
This focus leads us, I think, directly to our central question today, a critical tension within the material. For successful wealth building, must the focus primarily be on these internal, psychological mindset shifts and rigorous personal discipline, as, overwhelmingly outlined in the source, or do structural factors and acknowledged external unfairness pose a dominant, maybe unyielding constraint that we have to prioritize first?
That's a fascinating and I think a necessary distinction to make.
So I'll be arguing that internal transformation, the correction of mindset and the implementation of small, consistent discipline is the essential, the primary catalyst for wealth creation, really regardless of external starting circumstances.
Okay, and I'll counter that. Focusing too heavily on mindset, well, it risks minimizing the actual acknowledged impact of structural constraints and systemic unfairness. These often define the limits of what internal will alone can achieve, demanding external solutions first.
Right. Well, the material makes a compelling case, I think, by first diagnosing the root cause of financial limitation, the inheritance of a so-called scarcity mindset. Now, this isn't just about a lack of money. It's presented as a fixed cognitive pattern where beliefs like we can't afford it become an immediate, sort of non-negotiable endpoint. This aligns with long-held philosophical views, even going back to Aristotle, about how early conditioning shapes lifelong behavior patterns. The powerful suggestion here is that these patterns aren't destiny. They can actually be reprogrammed through conscious action. The profound shift advocated is, on the surface, simple. Move from "I can't afford it" to "How can I afford it?" This language change, this internal decision to embrace possibility, it sort of opens the mind to creative solutions. And crucially, this internal shift drives the necessary discipline, choosing consistent, modest investment over chasing luck. It prioritizes the invisible wealth, savings, security, compound growth, over visible display, which, as the text notes, is supported by research like The Millionaire Next Door. Even when faced with acknowledged unfairness, the guidance remains steadfast. Focus on the actionable steps, focus on what can be controlled. The argument is the internal system must be corrected first.
I wholeheartedly agree on the psychological danger of the scarcity mindset. It absolutely is defeatist, and that reframing exercises is useful, no question. However, I come at the application of this from a slightly different angle. While mindset shifts are invaluable for motivation, they are often, frankly, insufficient when foundational structural constraints are overwhelming. The material itself provides the counterpoint, doesn't it? It explicitly concedes a harsh truth. Structural inequalities, poor access to education, and systemic bias make wealth harder to attain for many. The problem with universally applying the shift to "how can I afford it" is that it sort of presupposes some level of baseline access to capital, to high-wage opportunities, professional networks, that systemic bias frequently denies. If you are systematically excluded from the job market, or if, maybe due to economic policy and location, your rent burden consumes, say, 70–80% of your income, well, asking "how can I afford it" stops being creative and starts becoming almost a psychological exercise in futility. Furthermore, the material uses that powerful metaphor of growth requiring discomfort to stop living in a small pot. This implies free, unbounded movement. But for many facing severe structural limitations, those external factors, wage stagnation, lack of affordable housing, they physically define the size of the pot, regardless of their internal will. Discipline, it's kind of useless if you don't have the disposable income necessary to consistently exercise that discipline. We have to address the root external causes of powerlessness first.
Wait, let's stop and look at the implication of that discipline, because I think you might be confusing a physical structure with a psychological environment. The fundamental error of the scarcity mindset, as defined in the source, is precisely treating financial limitation as permanent. Reprogramming through language and disciplined action recognizes limitation as temporary, allowing for expansion beyond the comfort zone. The small pot metaphor, while physical sounding, is primarily a metaphor for comfort and fear. The psychological pain of outgrowing one's current environment. The material suggests that courage is explicitly required to outgrow old environments, whether they are social, professional, or purely mental.
If we wait for external equality to just manifest, if we wait for the pot to be physically widened by policymakers or whoever, we are potentially giving up years of compounded growth that disciplined behavior could have afforded us even from a small baseline. If the limitation feels fixed and structural, the courage to act in spite of that is the initial internal step. We simply can't afford to sit paralyzed waiting for the world to become perfectly fair.
I understand the emphasis on courage, I do. But we have to be honest about the nature of the limitation we're asking people to overcome here. The structural constraints mentioned in Section 5, things like systemic bias limiting job movement, poor access to educational resources, crushing high rent, these are not just temporary mental barriers. They are enduring physical realities often backed by policy and entrenched economics. So while avoiding visible consumption and debt, as advocated in Section 4, is certainly good discipline, does that choice fundamentally solve the problem of institutional exclusion or lack of access to educational infrastructure? I guess I'm concerned that by focusing so exclusively on psychological reframing, we inadvertently suggest that individuals possess the power to negate these large, macro, unfair realities through sheer willpower. If the world is truly structurally unfair, as the text acknowledges, then placing the burden of fixing the problem solely on the internal mindset of the individual, well, it risks validating the system's failures, doesn't it?
But discipline serves as the ultimate equalizer, arguably independent of starting capital. It allows one to capitalize on opportunities when they do arrive, or maybe more importantly, to create opportunity out of necessity. The material provides a perfectly clear, almost empirical comparison, the difference between John and David. John, through discipline, invested a modest $100 per month and saw compound growth exceeding $20,000 over a decade. David spent the exact same $100 per month on low-probability shortcuts, gambling, lotteries, statistically wasting the money. Now, this isn't about wishing away structural problems. It's about choosing a behavioral framework that allows wealth to accumulate, even modestly, rather than being dissipated. This disciplined choice, the invisible spending on savings, is available, I'd argue, regardless of income level. It defines whether you keep what you have or consistently waste it seeking some shortcut. This compounding of behavior is the essence of internal transformation, and it's accessible even to those with low income.
Okay, I agree completely on the power of compounding behavior. And yes, John's result is a powerful testament to long-term consistency. However, we have to talk about the entry fee, right? That example, while demonstrating the virtue of discipline, also highlights the structural prerequisite. The Millionaire Next Door research cited shows success among those who have assets to keep and save. We are talking about a $100 per month baseline investment that requires $1,200 of surplus income per year. For someone facing the extremes of structural economic disparity, say working multiple minimum wage jobs in a high cost of living area, that $100 is often the difference between keeping the lights on and making a crippling debt payment. If 80% or 90% of your income is consumed by necessities due to systemic issues like high rent and inadequate wages, the structural challenge isn't choosing the index fund over the lottery. This structural challenge is achieving the baseline income necessary to consistently invest that $100 per month for a decade. The structural barrier dictates that many people simply don't get access to the table John was seated at.
That's a valid point regarding the extreme edge cases, the rent burden you mentioned. But this is exactly why the material focuses on transforming that feeling of powerlessness into action through the specific mechanism of the two-column exercise. I actually see this exercise as the ultimate rebuttal to the argument that external constraints make internal action futile. It forces the mind to shift from passive complaints, the things we can't control, to active steps, the things we can. So when faced with high rent, the external obstacle, the individual lists the controllable responses. Get a roommate, find a remote side gig, or negotiate a shorter commute to save time or gas. This framework doesn't deny the unfairness. It transforms the personal response to it by showing that momentum, however small, can be generated. This focus on what can be controlled is the key internal decision that starts with the text calls the epic story in the making, providing a behavioral bridge between mindset and material reality. It suggests there's always an internal move available, even if the external world feels hostile.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the two-column exercise adequately addresses the sheer scale of some structural hurdles. While listing small, controllable steps is fantastic for morale, absolutely, and preventing complete surrender to hopelessness, it risks masking the immense difficulty of the external challenge. Let's take your example. High rent goes into column A. The solution in column B is learn a remote skill. Okay, that's a great action, but what if systemic bias limits access to necessary training or networking opportunities? Or what if the available remote work pays poorly? The momentum gained from this small, disciplined action is often simply too small to overcome the structural headwind of, say, housing cost inflation or persistent wage stagnation. If the problem is genuinely rooted in structural inequality and policy failures, suggesting that individual ingenuity, a single person effectively moving from one small pot to another, is the primary solution, well, it risks minimizing the systemic severity. We cannot advocate for internal solutions to collective structural problems without risking a form of, perhaps, quietism, where the systemic drivers of poverty are left unaddressed because the burden has been fully placed on the individual's effort.
But if we wait for the structural headwind to just dissipate, we lose agency. The material emphasizes that focusing on internal discipline is about cultivating personal resilience and competence. Think about it. If John, the disciplined investor, faced structural bias, his competence and his habit of consistency would still position him better than David, the undisciplined gambler, to capitalize on any small opening that does appear, a training grant, a networking connection, a side hustle opportunity. That discipline acts as a kind of psychological and financial scaffolding. Without that internal foundation, even if structural equality were somehow achieved tomorrow, an individual lacking financial discipline would be highly likely to squander those new opportunities. The internal change is the precursor, I believe, to leveraging external fairness.
I see why you emphasize that foundational internal scaffolding. It certainly prevents waste, that's true. But let's clarify the priority here. While internal discipline is essential for maintaining wealth and preventing the squandering of resources, I maintain that structural constraints often determine who gets the opportunity to create surplus wealth in the first place. When the text itself highlights systemic bias, it is, I think, demanding we look outward. If the goal is not just individual wealth, but broad prosperity, then prioritizing the dismantling of external barriers, addressing high rent policy, fighting systemic exclusion from networks, that must come before, or at least alongside, universally demanding the individual shift their mindset. Both are critical, but one arguably defines the limits of the possible for many.
Ultimately, I believe the material demonstrates pretty clearly that internal transformation, the courage to grow, the discipline to consistently invest, and the conscious choice to reject the identity of powerlessness is the necessary first step and perhaps the ultimate lever of change. Even facing unfairness, the guidance is consistent. Take control of what you can. Wealth building is presented as a journey of internal change before external result.
That's an interesting summary, though I would still emphasize a different priority. While internal discipline is undeniably valuable, we must heed the material's own warning about structural inequality. We should be cautious, I think, about placing the primary burden of responsibility solely on mindset when constraints of access to capital, to housing, to education remain the dominant, often insurmountable obstacles for many. We must prioritize understanding how to dismantle those external barriers that prevent individuals from achieving the necessary baseline for that consistent investment to even begin.
Yeah, this discussion truly clarifies the complex relationship between psychology, behavior, and the larger financial ecosystem. It's clear that the path to financial success requires addressing both the internal demons of scarcity, as the text puts it, and the external realities of systematic constraints.
Absolutely. And examining both personal responsibility and structural constraints really deepens our understanding of the material and highlights why this topic remains so challenging, so complex. There's clearly much more to explore in the interplay of these factors,